本集节目由永丰金控冠名赞助，翻转金融，共创美好生活，以新闻开启国际视野，永丰金控与您一同掌握全球脉动。大家好，欢迎收听联合开炮，我是郭崇伦。在台北时间的16号的凌晨，美国、埃及跟卡达同时宣布，以色列跟哈马斯达成停火协议，将在拜登政府卸任的前一天1月19号生效。但是内容非常的复杂，现在我们还不知道细节，而且以色列跟哈马斯是没有直接谈判的，是透过这3个国家来作为中介。是不是中东的和平真的能够经过这个协议能够达成？那在川普上台以后会有哪些不确定的因素？还有伊朗是不是仍然会构成对以色列的威胁？我在16号的上午访问了耶路撒冷邮报前总编辑Yaakov Katz，我先问他关于协议，他现在目前知道会是怎么样一个形态。
It will be also in different batches. Like on the first day, you'll have 3 hostages. In the 7th day, you'll have another 4. Then at day 14, day 21, day 28. And then there's a last batch of about 14 who will be released at the end. Presumably, the living hostages will be released first. The dead hostages will be released second, because let's remember, out of the 98 hostages that remain in Hamas captivity, only about half remain alive. The rest of them are presumed. Some Israel knows as a matter of fact of being dead, and some are presumed to have either been killed on October 7th of 2023 when Hamas launched its attack, and their bodies were taken to Gaza, or they were killed over the last 15 months in Hamas captivity. On day 16 of the 42-day phase 1, the sides, Israel, Hamas, with the mediation of the Qataris, the Egyptians, the Americans, are supposed to once again sit down and begin negotiating phase 2. The problem here, and this is where I would say most of my concern rests, is we can't trust Hamas. Right? Israel, for all its flaws, for all the criticism we could level against Israel, and there's legitimate criticism, Israel is a democracy. Israel is a country governed by rule of law, has a government, has a parliament, has a judicial system, has a free media. Israel is a country that if it backs away from the deal, it will be either illegal, it will be censored by the public, by the media, by the parliament. In Hamas, they could do whatever they want. And that is why this whole arrangement and this relationship or this conflict has been lopsided from the beginning, because you are a government, free country, democracy, rule of law, fighting against a terrorist group that has no laws, has no rules, and can do whatever it wants. So there is a fear, genuine fear, among definitely the hostage families that if their loved ones, and these are mostly the men, either the male soldiers or the men who are of age, under the age of 55, what Hamas has referred to as military age, even though someone in their 40s is not serving in the military anymore. Those men will remain in captivity pending the phase 2 and the phase 3 of this arrangement.
So what would be the role of the third party? I mean, the Egyptian, the Qatarian, or the American can play to secure this kind of mutual agreed process of the agreement. So the third party should have a role in here, right?
Well, I mean, listen, Israel doesn't talk directly with Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist, brutal, murderous, probably the most barbaric terrorist organization we can imagine. If we thought once upon a time, 10 years ago, that when ISIS popped its head up, Daesh, in Syria, Iraq, and other places, that they were the most brutal terrorist group, putting people in cages, burning them alive, murdering, cutting people's heads off on live camera. What we saw on October 7th in southern Israel with the Hamas invasion was atrocities that no one should ever have to experience or see. And I think the Jewish people thought that they had left behind, those were the dark days of the Holocaust during the Second World War in the 1940s, but that this would never happen again. But it did happen again, and it happened inside the state of Israel. And this was exactly what the state of Israel was established for, to prevent these types of atrocities from ever happening. The third parties, mostly in this case, Egypt and Qatar, the Americans also do play a role. Their role is more pressuring the Qataris and the Egyptians to act, because Hamas doesn't talk with America either. And America doesn't talk to Hamas. But the Egyptians and the Qataris do talk to Hamas. For example, in Qatar and Doha, there are Hamas officials who live there. Egypt has had long-standing ties with Hamas. That's mostly as a result of the fact that Egypt shares a border with Gaza. So all of those countries, and also Turkey, by the way, plays a role. Yes. President Erdogan, he has also in the past given refuge in Turkey to Hamas leaders. So those countries in particular will be able to put pressure on Hamas to abide by the deal, to fulfill its obligations in the deal, and hopefully to come into a second round of negotiations that will lead to another phase in the deal.
So there's two things. People would suggest that Hamas would abide by the agreement. First is that on the first phase, there's going to be a more humanitarian aid coming through. That's one thing. The second thing is Israel still keep the option of strike. That means that Hamas will be on defensive whenever that they try to break away from the agreement. Do you agree with that?
Those are the levers, right? So in every deal, you want to keep some leverage for both sides, right? Israel's leverage is we will not pull out completely from Gaza. Israel is going to reposition its forces on the eastern front. So the western border of Gaza is the Mediterranean, right? The eastern border of Gaza is from where Hamas invaded on October 7th. That's into Israel. Israeli forces are now in the middle of the Gaza Strip. They are holding a corridor throughout Gaza to prevent bad guys, Hamas forces, from moving from the south to the north and vice versa. So Israel will be repositioning its forces to the eastern border. It will keep some forces in the south in what's known as the Philadelphia corridor, the strip of land between Gaza and Egypt where Hamas had tunnels that it used to bring in weaponry. And that's how it became the monster that it became. So Israel wants to make sure that doesn't happen again. That continued position in Gaza is Israel's pressure and the fact that it will renew operations if Hamas does not abide by the deal. But don't forget that Hamas also has leverage. And what is Hamas's leverage? That it still has the hostages. Right. So if Israel had made a deal, the ideal deal, the best deal, would have been a deal that we get everyone at once. And we give you the prisoners and we pull out our forces, or whatever it might be. That would have been the best for Israel. Hamas wouldn't agree to that. Right. Everyone has asked me, why didn't Israel do that deal? Well, we wanted that deal, but Hamas refused to accept that deal because then it leaves them without the leverage that they want. They want to keep leverage. They understand. And by the way, this has been the brilliance of what Hamas did. You see, from day one of this war, Israel lost on October 7th. There was no real victory to achieve here. Because what if I told you on October 8th, the day after the Hamas invasion, when they've abducted 251 people, massacred 1,200 people, and I told you, listen, we're going to go to war, and we're going to decimate Hamas. We're going to dismantle Hamas. We're going to remove Hamas as the governing entity over the Gaza Strip. But we won't get back the hostages. Is that a victory? There will be some people who will say yes. There will be a lot of people who will say no. But what if I told you the opposite? I told you we will get back all the hostages. But Hamas, that group that massacred your people, that did the most horrific things to women and children and men, they will remain in power. you will have some people who will say, well, it's a victory because we got back our people. And there will be a lot of people who will say, well, they're still there. Right. We didn't do anything.
Right.
This is why the term victory is so elusive in this specific conflict. And this is, again, what I said before about how it was a lopsided war. Well, it has been from the beginning. And it's always going to be difficult for a country, a military that abides by rules of war, by international law. It's always going to be difficult for that military to fight against a terrorist group that embeds itself in civilian infrastructure, that hides in hospitals and schools and homes, that fights in the way it does, above ground and underground. It's never going to be a clear, decisive victory like what we thought we know. And, your region knows from the days of wars that were fought here in the past in the Pacific against Japan and other, this is not that type of war.
So we are not sure about which political authority is going to exist after the war in Gaza, do we?
We don't yet know that, right? This is one of the big, I wouldn't say maybe mysteries, but the lack of clarity around who will govern Gaza.
That would connect with what you have just said. I mean, if that is not resolved, we are going to see the situation repeated again.
One of the war is just a means, or military operations are just a means to a political resolution to a conflict. I can achieve a lot through military conflict, but I won't be able to achieve everything. I need to follow it up with a political process.
Right.
And this was Sun Tzu, I think, who said this, however many couple thousands of years ago. But for this to happen, I need to have an idea of what I want. And I think here Israel has said clearly it doesn't want Hamas to be in charge, but it never worked towards, okay, so who will be in charge? And there aren't a lot of candidates, right? It's not like Egypt wants to go in. They don't want to have anything to do with Gaza. Mm-hmm. The Saudis, the Emiratis, the other Arab countries, they don't want. There's the Palestinian Authority, which is in the West Bank in Ramallah, led by Mahmoud Abbas. They're not exactly a friend or partner of Israel, but maybe it needs to be them because they're the only ones, but they're weak and they're corrupt and they have their own issues. So this is a problem. We need to create, what is that entity going to be? Now, it can't be an Israeli creation, because then everyone will say this is just a puppet of Israel. This is just another way of Israel continuing to control Gaza. What it seems is going to happen, there will be some sort of group that will come together by the Saudis, by the Emiratis, by the Egyptians, by the Palestinians, that will be led by some new civilian authority of sorts, that will be at first stage in control of this, as you mentioned, the influx of humanitarian aid that's going to come in. So how does it get distributed? How do we rebuild Gaza? Gaza is devastated, right? How does it get rebuilt? So that needs to happen. Where Hamas falls into all of this, unclear. And I think that Israel will be watching very carefully to make sure that Hamas does not reconstitute itself, does not rebuild itself. And I mean, I'll just add to this, this will require of Israel a dramatic change in the way that it fights. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a model here maybe for Taiwan to some extent. Not that I want to advocate war in this part of the world, but what Israel did for many years in the run up to October 7th was what we can call a policy of containment. Okay, so we tried to contain the threat. What do I mean by that? It saw what Hamas was doing. We're on this side of the border, they're on that side of the border. We see them with their weapons, we see them with their positions, we see them digging tunnels, we see their rockets coming in, we see them building the rocket launchers. Every year and a half or 2 years since Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, it was 20 years ago. Every 2 years or so, on average, there was a war fought between the sides. Right. So this wasn't new. This wasn't a secret that there is an enemy over there. But Israel kept on saying, okay, we'll hit them a little. They'll hit us a little. And, we'll keep kicking the can down the road. Then there were other ideas. We'll bring in workers from Gaza. We'll try to improve the economic situation. Then there was another idea. We'll give them money. The Qataris, through Israel, gave them billions of dollars, right? Improve again the economic situation. Everything was built towards, let's not have to fight a war with them. Even though they said publicly, we want to kill all of you. They said, we're coming for you. They had plans to invade your country. Our intelligence knew about it. But we kept on saying, no, we don't want it. No, you just want money. No, you just want more economic prosperity. And then on October 7th, when they invaded, that policy of containment blew up in our faces. So the question is, for the future, what does Israel do? And I'm not even talking about a month from now, because that's easy. A month from now, you know what you'll do. You'll attack if you see something happen. What happens a year from now?
Right.
When there's quiet, when the south of Israel has been rebuilt, when the tourism has returned to Israel, when flights are back, when the economy is growing once again, and then you get intelligence that Hamas is planting a rocket launcher in a school. Do you attack? Or do you try to contain it once again? And these are going to be serious dilemmas that the country and the government will have to deal with. And there's not going to be an easy answer. And I think this is a shift in our defense policy of how do we operate from a strategic perspective in confronting these threats that we face.
But some people argue that after this October 7th attack, that and the Israel counter-attack, that the whole Middle East situation had changed. We are seeing Hezbollah had weakened, even destroyed to a degree. We are seeing that Iran is not that kind of threat anymore. So are you seeing there's a fundamental changes happening in the Middle East right now?
October 7th was the darkest day of Israeli history.
Okay.
But was also a change in paradigm. The coin dropped. It was the wake-up call that we needed. And you see how Israel has gone on the offensive. It has decimated Hamas, right? When we talk about how Gaza is devastated, it is, and that's a tragedy for the civilians of Gaza. And my heart goes out to the people who have been killed, those civilians who have been killed. About half of the people killed in Gaza are civilians. Half are Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists. But the reason civilians have been killed, the responsibility, the blame is on Hamas because of the way Hamas fights. If they hide in a school or in a house and they put a rocket launcher on the balcony over there, of course Israel has to attack, right? That is completely legal, and that is the moral imperative of any country to defend itself. This is a cynical use of civilians. This is what Hamas wanted. But Hamas has been decimated. Hezbollah has been severely weakened. We saw the beeper attack. We saw the walkie-talkie attack, the beeper attack. Something even here in Taiwan, there's some weird connection to some extent of a company that was used as a front maybe for it without knowing. But the Hezbollah is severely weakened. They still exist though. They still do have rockets. Iran is more vulnerable today than it has ever been. Right. Still has capabilities. They still are moving forward with their nuclear program, but their air defense systems have been destroyed by Israel. The S-300 batteries, the Russian ones that were supplied to them to protect their nuclear facilities. Israel destroyed 3 of them, one in April and then two or three in October. So the whole region has now changed. This Iranian axis that connected Iran and, of course, Syria, Bashar al-Assad, his ruthless regime is gone. And Israel destroyed, within the matter of days, all of the strategic Syrian assets. We don't know yet what will come of the Syrian governments. When you look at the region, Iran, Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, it is all weakened. But they can rebuild. They can reconstitute. What is needed is something that will counter what they will try to do. Now, the way to maybe do that is to achieve 3 things, I think. The first is, tactically on the ground, we have to improve the situation in Gaza. We have to show that Hamas is the enemy, not the people of Gaza, and rebuild Gaza to a way that it can show that this war was to destroy Hamas, not to destroy Gaza. Lebanon, they are now putting in a new government. That government has to fight Hezbollah and prevent it from coming back down to the south. Prevent it from once again trying to terrorize not Israel, Lebanon itself. Lebanon needs to have a better future. And of course, then there's Iran. Now, how do you counter Iran? There are two ways. One is, I think, through regional integration. There is an opportunity now for Israel and Saudi Arabia to normalize relations. Israel, under the Abraham Accords, normalized relations with the Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco. There's an opportunity now to do it with the Saudis. That will show the region, and especially the Iranians, they are losing. This is a new Middle East. They are the bad guys. Everyone else is on the good side. And for the new administration of Donald Trump, when it comes in just a few days, to send a clear message to Iran that if they move forward with their nuclear program, they will pay a price. This has to stop. Their nuclear ambitions are the greatest threat to, I would say, not even the Middle East, to the world, because of what they could possibly achieve. And I think you in your region know this as best as anyone with what North Korea has obtained with its own nuclear weapons and the way that it can project its power, threaten countries in this region, and it can't really be stopped because it has nuclear weapons. If you think of North Korea and what it is able to do here, apply that now to the Iranians, a regime that is far worse, far more dangerous, the greatest state sponsor of terrorism. Now imagine them with nuclear weapons. So this is a unique opportunity that we're in right now.
Let me follow the last quote, please. If Iran nuclear program cannot be contained diplomatically with the help of the United States, should we consider the military options? I mean, the surgical strike on Iran nuclear capability. Would that still be on the table? I mean, there's rumors that several times during the Biden administration, Israel wants to do it by itself. And with the coming friendly Trump administration, would that be possible? But you don't see the situation in the Middle East can be simplified as a new Cold War that is forming. Then on the one side, it was Israel, United States, and the other side will be China, Iran, and Russia.
I mean, I wouldn't go as that far, because I think when we look at history for the moment, it wasn't that long ago. In 1973, when Israel fought its last really big war, the Yom Kippur War, when Egypt and Syria both invaded Israel. These were two countries that were supported by the Soviet Union, right? Then there was a real Cold War. You had Russians that were in the region. They were supporting the Arab regimes. When you look at, you still have a Russian presence in Syria, but when you look at the Middle East today, there's a clear alignment of most countries today with America, with the West, right? China is, of course, has its economic leverage and pressure over all these countries, and Russia too, to some extent. But when I look at, the Abraham Accords, the Emiratis want closer ties with Israel. They want closer ties with America. Same with Bahrain. Same with other Gulf states. Same with Morocco in North Africa. Egypt, of course, gets military aid from the United States. Lebanon, America's a big player in Lebanon together with France. You have the situation in Syria where you have Russia, but you also have American positions and forces that are in that region. So you see that the direction, if we compare 55, 60 years ago to where we are today, it is an improvement, right? With that said, we have to keep that push to the West and with strong American involvement. And this is, we mentioned this briefly before, but where Donald Trump is going, there are some concerns, the isolationist move to stay away from the world. I think this is dangerous. I think the world needs a strong America, an America that is involved, that is engaged. I think, you see that here with Taiwan and China. You see that in Korea. You see that definitely also in the Middle East.
that's my next question is, can Donald Trump be trusted? I mean, in his first term, he is very friendly with Israel, recognizing Jerusalem as the new capital. He's pushing forward the Abraham Accord, and people are expecting that he would do the same thing in his second term. But a lot of European countries are very suspicious of Donald Trump, especially his credibility and the direction that he's heading. In Taiwan, we also have that kind of doubt. What if China attacked Taiwan, and would the U.S. would commit itself militarily to involve with the situation? What is, from your point of view, the credibility of the United States, and can Donald Trump be trusted in a sense?
Well, time will tell. Obviously, I don't know. I do think that Donald Trump does bring a degree of reliability and unpredictability to the job. Reliability in the sense that he is tough. He does, to some extent, stand by his word, at least when it comes to foreign affairs. When we look at the Middle East, he had promised, you mentioned the Jerusalem embassy. He said he would do it. He did it, despite a lot of people who said he shouldn't. He said he would pull out of the Iran deal back in 2018. He did that as well. We could argue if that was the right move, the wrong move, but he did it. There were moves that he made that, from the Israeli perspective, definitely were very supportive. The question of what he will do now in this new term, which will set his legacy to an extent,
Right.
is a big unknown. And I think when we look at the world, he has major challenges. You have the Russia-Ukraine war, which needs some sort of resolution. Of course, China-Taiwan is something that obviously brings you great concern and should. And what would he do if that were to, God forbid, happen? It's difficult to tell. I think you can look at, though, what the United States has done in the Middle East as maybe a model for what could potentially happen here. You could look at what's happened with Russia-Ukraine as a model for what could potentially happen there. And I think when you look at those two models, the answer is that they won't do that much because America, we take Ukraine as an example. From day one, the world, NATO, US, Europe could have instituted a no-fly zone over Ukraine. In other words, no Russian aircraft allowed to fly over Ukraine. Well, what that would have meant was that you're putting American aircraft against Russian aircraft, and one of them is going to get shot down. And then where does that go could lead to what some people would say a nuclear holocaust, right? Now, China also is a nuclear power. Would America want to go up against China? Based on what we've seen until now, no. And even in the Middle East, where there isn't that nuclear threat, what America was willing to do was give Israel great support, weaponry, financial support. But when it came to military assets, it was willing to do just two things. One was missile defense, which is super important. We saw how the United States helped intercept Iran's missile barrages in April and in October of last year. Very important for Israel. And it launched some attacks only in one place, in Yemen, right, against the Houthis. Why Yemen? Because no risk of a response. There's no real response. But B, what the Houthis are doing, besides for attacking Israel, they're disrupting trade through the Red Sea. That's very important to the Americans. And then there was also the British who got involved there as well. So look at those two models and then say to yourself, okay, what more could America do here? Now, there's obviously much more, but you kind of see that, and maybe, someone can make an argument, well, that was Biden. Both those wars, Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East, under Biden. Maybe Trump would do more. I don't think so. I think that the U.S. could do more, but then it would basically mean America is fighting a war. And I don't think that America wants that. I don't think that Trump wants it. I don't think that the American people want it. And I think there are ways to avoid it, by the way. You see, America has great power, but in order to use that power, it has to be willing to project it. For example, with the Iranians, you have to put a credible military threat on the table. Until now, every American president has said, well, all options are on the table. But every Iranian has known that that's just talk. It doesn't really mean much. If America were to send its forces to the region and make a threat to the Iranians that if you dare, we will attack you, that could have great impact, right? But that is, again, because we're talking about a country that has yet to cross that nuclear threshold, has yet to obtain that nuclear weapon. When nuclear weapons are on the table, because we see what's happened with Russia-Ukraine, we see what might happen one day here, I think it's a different calculation. And it makes things much more complicated.
My final questions. What brings you to Taiwan, and what's your interest in your trip this time?
Well, I've always wanted to come visit Taiwan. I've been invited a few times in the past, and it just never worked out. I was invited to speak at a conference here in Taipei, and took the opportunity to be able to come and meet with some people and learn more about the country. I think that there are definite similarities between Taiwan and Israel.
Right.
In the sense of small countries, similar in size. You have a lot more people than we do. Was it 25 million people here?
24.
24 million people. So we have just 10 million people. But a similar in size, similar in culture, democratic, Western countries, technologically advanced, aligned with the United States and with the West, but with big enemies out there. In your case, you have obviously China, which continues to violate airspace and the sea, the South China Sea, and to threaten all the time a potential invasion and attack on Taiwan. Israel has great threats throughout its own region. And I think that you see how two countries that are small in size, small in population, you're bigger than us, but tiny compared to China, are able to, despite the threats that we face, able to thrive. And that says something about people, I think. It says something about the desire to succeed, the desire to grow, and not just to, survival could come in different ways. You could just survive, very basic. But when you're able to prosper and thrive, that says something about a person and a culture. And I see those similarities between Taiwan and Israel, both countries surrounded by enemies and great threats, but able to build up economic superpowers and most technologically advanced countries here when it comes to chips and semiconductors, and Israel when it comes to cyber and defense and life sciences and so much more, and agriculture. I mean, you really see, wow, there's something that we both can learn from one another, and that is the opportunity that I've been presented with. So I'm glad to be here for it.
Thank you very much for your time. And you share your thought on the issues that surround us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
上网搜寻 VIP.UDN.com 到联合报数位版，看更多精彩的报道。